I am back, people, and although my outfit might not have changed since my last video, times certainly have, especially here in America. But with that said, it's great to be back in the swing of things. And picking up where we left off, today we're going to be doing a used iPad Pro 2018 versus iPad Air 4 comparison. Many of you wanted this video specifically, so here I am giving it to you. But I also recommend watching my in-depth comparison between all iPad Pro 2020 and 2018 models to the iPad Air 4, and also my iPad Air 4 versus iPad Pro performance test that I posted about 2 weeks ago. But with all that said, before we continue here, I'd appreciate it if you leave a like on this video. As always, comment if you have any questions, suggestions, or opinions, and of course, subscribe for more content like this. Click the bell icon if you haven't already. It does help the channel out a lot. Design-wise, these tablets are basically identical with a few nuances, which I will highlight here, but I mean, if you flip them around to the back, you can totally tell that iPad Air 4 ripped off of the 2018 Pro 11-inch here, especially with the look at the camera module. It's the same module, by the way, minus the flash here. This little dot is a microphone, little port or opening, but everything else is the same. I mean, from the logo placement to the branding to the smart connector placement to the implementation of Apple Pencil's 2nd gen, which allows you to charge and place the pen magnetically on the iPad. The only major difference I can see is with the antenna line. One is present on the 2020 models as well, but not present with the iPad Air 4, as you can see here. Another thing I want to highlight is with biometrics. The iPad Air 4, as you may know, makes use of a power button implemented Touch ID sensor, which is really convenient and quick. I went over that in my review and my other comparisons that I've done. It works just as well, if not better in some cases, than iPad Pro with Face ID, especially if you're wearing a mask in public here, but both are very convenient and secure as well. The bezels are also a bit thicker with the iPad Air 4, or the border around the display, because the display itself is a tiny bit smaller, 10.9 inches compared to the 11-inch display with the iPad Pro, but of course we'll touch more on the display nuances in a few moments here. I also want to touch on speaker quality. So while the iPad Air 4 has 4 speaker grills, it only has 2 speakers, one on one side and one on the other side, which offers a true stereo experience. But as I demonstrated in my real in-depth test between all the iPad Pro models and the iPad Air 4, the quad speaker setup in the iPad Pro, especially the 12.9-inch model, which we're not talking about in this video per se, but it's just better with the iPad Pro. You get a fuller, louder sound, although the sound with the iPad Air 4 is definitely decent. So it's not exactly a deal breaker, and neither of these allow you to plug in a headphone jack, but if you want better sound quality out the gate, the iPad Pro is the way to go. Oh, and real quick, both these tablets have USB Type-C, which allows, more universal, or rather versatile connectivity if you want to attach like an external SSD or an accessory. This has been a Pro feature found in the Pro tablet for the past 2 years, and Apple finally decided to implement it into the Air 4 as well. And finally, with regard to colors available, iPad Pro 2018 comes in 2 more boring ones, silver and space gray, although both look great, whereas the iPad Air 4 comes in 3 additional more fun colors, sky blue, green, and pink. So if that makes a difference to you, then obviously opt for the colorful iPad, but I don't think that's like a reason to buy the Air 4 over the Pro, so stick around for more differences here. But having said all that, let's now touch on the differences in display quality here. And with regard to everything except PPI resolution and the color science, the Pro's display is better. And while both are great for media consumption and note-taking and drawing and pretty much anything you can dream up to do with your tablet, the Pro just outshines the Air 4 for several reasons. Number one, it's a little bit bigger, so the bezels are a little bit smaller, as I said here. Number two, it's brighter, 100 nits brighter, which can make a bit of a difference in the dark or in a lighter environment, excuse me, because with sunlight, your display will look dimmer. And finally, the refresh rate is double with the Pro 11-inch here. That was one of the major features that was introduced with the 2017 iPad Pro's promotion, has been a staple feature and a reason why I bought this tablet to begin with. It is just a really remarkable experience. Everything just seems twice as smooth because the display refreshes itself, double the amount of times the Air 4 does, meaning that every animation just looks more lifelike and fluid, and that does make a difference, especially with the UI as you scroll through apps and scroll through web pages and stuff like that, although some apps are locked down to 60 frames a second, so both are going to be similar in some apps and in some ways, but overall, I would say the iPad Pro definitely has a more enjoyable experience, but to most consumers, you're not gonna really notice that, and you can't really pick it up very well on the camera, although you can kind of. I mean, this does look smoother, I think, with the naked eye, even shooting at 4K 30 FPS. However, once again, though, you have to be in person to really notice if you want that higher refresh rate. You can take my word for it. If you are a sweaty tech nerd, then you might want to opt for this. But if you could care less and you just want a decent tablet that has a great display, then I think the Air 4 will do a great job. And of course, the workflow experience is going to be pretty much identical between these two tablets, as for all intents and purposes, they have the same form factor and screen size with that 0.1 inch difference, which I think is very negligible here, but I can pull up the, virtual keyboards. It's like the same experience here if I can do that. Yeah, like no difference here that you can discern with your naked eye, even with like note taking as well, which I can demo here in the Notes app. Of course, once again, the refresh rate can make a bit of a difference here. I think that when you're note taking with the Air 4, it feels a little bit less lifelike than with the iPad Pro, which will always be just a little bit more jumpy, a little bit more fluid and real feeling. But I mean, with both, if the iPad Air 3 could do a decent job with note taking and stuff like that, so can the Air 4. And the latency here is about the same between these two tablets, even though the display refresh rate is better with the Pro here. And while we're on the topic of note taking, I want to quickly shout out my channel sponsor, Paperlike here. I'm sure you're aware of them if you watch iPad content, but if you're not, they make a fantastic screen protector, which is, of course, called Paperlike, and it brings a paper-like feel to your iPad, which otherwise offers a pretty glossy, sort of slippery feel with the Apple Pencil natively. And I didn't like that when I first got my iPad Pro back in July of 2019, although I was happy to consolidate everything into one device. I was missing that paper-like feel that I got with pen and paper and pencil with my composition notebooks and loose leaf that I was accustomed to for years. So although it's not like perfect, it brings, I would say, like 85 to 90% of that feel back to your iPad, which is just fantastic, while also not sacrificing too much of your display quality. So I highly recommend this. I use it every day with my daily driver 12.9 inch that I use to take notes with in college. So I will leave a link in the video description if you're interested. Every purchase also helps out the channel as it is an affiliate link. So definitely check these guys out if you are interested in digital note taking and the like. Next up, let's quickly touch on battery life here. And although iPads will generally get you through the day no problem, the iPad Air 4 is going to be the better performer here, at least by a little bit, for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a brand new tablet, so the battery is not deteriorated, it is fresh. Whereas if you're buying a used iPad Pro 2018, the battery integrity is not going to be 100%, meaning that you're not getting its full potential anymore. Also, the display with the Air 4, while it is lower refresh rate and dimmer, that does save with battery life. This display definitely sucks more power, so keep that in mind. And also, there's a brand new processor architecture in here, A14 over the A12X in here, so it's going to be more efficient and more power sipping, so you might get a few minutes to like an hour maybe. I haven't done any scientific testing, so I recommend looking at some tests done on certain sites and stuff like that, but generally speaking, you're going to get similar battery life here, although you're probably going to get a bit more with the Air 4. Next up, let's very briefly go over camera quality, because the module found in the iPad Air 4 is the same one you can find in the 2018 iPad Pro. Apple just stole it and slapped it into here, minus the flash once again, which does come in handy in darker environments, but other than that, you get the same nice photo quality, 4K 60 video and 12 megapixel photo capabilities, and also you get a 7 megapixel shooter on the front with both, albeit with the Air 4 you don't get the Face ID text, so no Animoji and no portrait mode, but that's not really a game-changing feature, I would say. For all intents and purposes, the camera capabilities with these two tablets are exactly the same, minus the flash and the Face ID tech, which is more novelty, if anything at all. And finally, let's touch on performance here. And before I say anything at all, the A12X within the iPad Pro 2018 performs identically to the A12Z within the iPad Pro 2020 11-inch model, which I used in my recent in-depth performance test between it and the iPad Air 4. So if you want a really good idea as to how these tablets are going to perform against each other, watch that video. I'll leave it linked in the video description, but I'll give you my general conclusion that I came to here. So with the iPad Air 4, you get a newer A14 processor with a 5nm architecture, meaning that each individual core is more powerful, resulting in a higher single core score, meaning that everyday tasks are going to be a bit quicker, apps are going to open a bit snappier, and sometimes animations are going to be a bit quicker as well. However, with regard to heavier tasks, the 6-core processor in here just does not match the 8-core processor found in the iPad Pro. That's the A12X, and as you can see, that is represented with the multi-core scores here, 4300 with the iPad Air 4 and around 4700 with the iPad Pro, and that makes exporting 4K video quicker. That makes sometimes gaming quicker, although Metal performance appears to be a bit better with the Air 4, so keep that in mind here. But yeah, overall CPU and GPU with the iPad Pro is just superior, meaning that you can just do more heavy-ended tasks with this tablet, although once again, things are going to seem a bit more snappy with the iPad Air 4. Oh, and two more things I want to mention. Number one, the amount of RAM within these two tablets is the same, 4 gigs, unlike the 2020 models, which have 6 gigs, which makes a tiny bit of a difference, I think, but nothing I can really tell. And secondly, before anybody says anything at all, yes, this iPad is running an older version of Geekbench and iPadOS. It's running iPadOS 13.4 for a reason. This is my beloved 11-inch that I bought last year, and talking about this version of iPadOS on this device uplifted my channel to what it is today. So this is a very nostalgic device to me. I barely touch it. I'm keeping it in as great of condition I can keep it in. So this is more of a, you know, artifact, if you will, to me, more of a, you know, nostalgic piece that I don't really want to touch, which is why I haven't updated it. But I assure you, all of my assertions are accurate, because the performance between iPadOS 14 and 13 are very minimal, and I've done testing, or extensive testing, with my iPad Pro 11-inch 2020 model with pretty much the same processor on iPadOS 14.1, and the differences are not there at all. So everything I've said is based off of using iPadOS 14.1. Absolutely no worries. I just wanted to make you aware of that, because some people were concerned about this in my in-depth performance test, although both of those iPads were running 14.1 at the time, although my Geekbench scores were a bit older. But yeah, the scores are the same between iPadOS 13 and iPadOS 14, so no worries there. So having said all of this here, let's lastly talk about pricing and just like what I would do if I were you. So the iPad Air 4 goes brand new for $599 on Apple's website with 64 gigs starting out, whereas the iPad Pro also starts out at 64 gigs but goes for a little over or under $600. With some accessories, sometimes people want to bundle that in just to get rid of their device quicker, and that's something to think about too. Quite frankly, a steal if you can get like an Apple Pencil, for example, for around the $600 to $700 range. Although you have to keep in mind, you're buying a used device here, you're buying a, you know, used or a more beat up chassis, you're buying, you know, a battery with less integrity here, but you are buying more power and a better display. Whereas with the iPad Air, you're buying a newer processor, you're buying more colors, you're buying more longevity, I would think, a better battery, and also you can, you know, finance it. You can also apply Apple Care as well. So there's benefits to buying a new device and there's benefits to buying an older device. But if I were you, honestly, if processor performance and the display was important to me, especially with regard to promotion, I might honestly opt for the iPad Pro used if I can find one in decent condition and with maybe an accessory or two bundled in. However, the iPad Air 4 is still a fantastic bargain in value, and if you want to finance it or just buy it brand new for somebody, then I would highly recommend doing that as well. And that about wraps things up here. I hope this video was helpful. I'd appreciate it once again if you'd leave a like, of course, if you want to. No one's forcing you to. Leave a comment, as any engagement helps my videos perform better. And of course, subscribe for more content like this and click the bell icon, as it does help the channel out a lot. Expect some iPhone 12 mini content coming soon. I'll get that next week, and also some more iPad comparisons between stuff like the Surface Go and also iPad Air 3 versus iPad Air 4. That's another video I might do. And I'm really excited for November 10th because of Apple Silicon Macs, and I want to upgrade my MacBook Pro and also see what MacBook Air, like a new MacBook Air, might have in stores. So a lot of tech to cover this month and the next, so stay tuned for that. And as always, I'm Noah, and I will catch you all in the next one.